gonna throw. One-on-one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go, man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson, he tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Zack intercepts it! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back, pressure coming, Aguilar floats it up, incomplete! No flags! Head on back up the mountain! Carolina wins it in double overtime! Loftus, out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone, incomplete! Incomplete! The bell belongs to us! Carolina wins it! 47-45 in double overtime!
Bernard fields it at the 26, heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is gonna take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
Hey guys, and welcome in to another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. Zach Hubbard alongside of us here for tonight's edition of the podcast, which means we are talking recruiting. But before we do that, we have to start off this edition of the podcast in a very sad way because Carolina and the Carolina family has lost one of its more recent players, AJ Beatty, a former defensive end for Carolina, a guy that we talked about here on this podcast not too long ago when he was coming out of high school. He passed away on Monday. It was announced by his family. This is actually just a couple of days. I'm looking at the obituary right now, a couple of days after his birthday, and passed away unexpectedly on July 14th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was alerted to this. Kedrick Bingley-Jones, the former defensive lineman for Carolina, did send out a tweet, and that's how I saw it. And unfortunately, they do have the official obituary form up there, just 23 years of age. Of course, was a standout at Central Catholic High School in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, was rated as one of the best players in the state of Pennsylvania during his season when he came out of high school back in 2019. Helped lead his school to a championship game, to a championship win back in 2019. Earned 40 scholarships over the course of his time, all Division I scholarships, and of course would commit to Carolina, play at the University of North Carolina. Did play defensive end and then eventually transitioned to center. Carolina tried to get him to work there, but unfortunately he ended up leaving and transferring to the University of Albany, where he graduated summa cum laude in 2024 with a bachelor's of science in cyber security. Dedicated to service. This is what it says per his obituary. Dedicated to service, AJ graduated from Allegheny County Sheriff's Academy in 2025 and proudly served as a deputy with the Allegheny County Sheriff's Office. AJ was the cherished son of Aaron and Kim Beatty, loving brother of Maya Beatty, and adored uncle of Selania. So just a sad way to start this edition of the podcast, especially for someone that was so young, just 23 years of age. Can't imagine what his family is going through, but I thought that we would start by just saying that we are praying for his family. We are sending our thoughts and prayers their way during this incredibly difficult time. And same thing to the Carolina family, anybody that was affected by this. Mac Brown, of course, was the guy that recruited him. I'd imagine that he is taking it very hard as well. And some of the players that played with him But we did want to start out just by saying rest in peace to AJ Beatty, and we'll make the very difficult transition to talk about Carolina's latest commitment, this one on the 2026 trail, but hopefully one that'll inspire a little bit of excitement here on this edition of the podcast, certainly after the way that we had to start it off. But, Zach, this is a huge one for Carolina because they go into the state of Ohio and flip a guy that was committed to Ohio State, one of the top safeties in this class, and a guy that I think every Carolina fan was completely shocked by. Let's just start with that angle of it. How shocked were you to see the commitment announcement? Because to me, I mean, this was a guy that was not even on any of our radars. Nobody that I saw really was talking about this as a possibility. And all of a sudden last night out of nowhere, we're sitting there waiting for some sort of news, maybe on the CJ Sadler front, maybe on one of the other fronts. And all of a sudden we get this huge commitment for Carolina, this huge flip from Ohio State.
Yeah, I think shocking is absolutely the word I would use here. I mean, this is a guy, like you mentioned, that we did not have our radar. Apparently took an official visit to campus back in June, which is something that I had completely missed. But like you mentioned, I mean, this is a guy from Ohio, was committed to the defending national champions in Ohio State. So you'd figure that this would be a guy that they would be interested in keeping. I mean, when you look at this on paper, this is a guy that should be a slam dunk to go to the Buckeyes. And, Coach Belichick and staff were able to make this flip. So really, really astounding. And like you mentioned, came out of nowhere, especially considering the number of guys that they already have committed at the defensive back spot. So really surprising, but really, really positive addition to the class here.
Yeah, I think what's shocking about this is you mentioned the number of guys that Carolina has committed. Certainly that's an angle of it for sure. The fact that he was a guy that did sort of sneak on campus, no one that I saw had written anything about him actually being a part of the official visit group that was on campus at some point. I'm not sure when exactly he was on campus. I think it was probably early in the month because that seemed like when they had the Air Jordan NASCAR that was brought in, put on the field, and they took all the photo ops with that. He was one of the guys that had one of those photos. It seems like the guys later on in the month didn't necessarily have those same types of pictures. So that's where my speculation comes from that. But I mean, this guy was like a ghost. He's on campus. No one knows about it. Everybody's kind of staying calm and keeping cool. He's not showing up in any of the photos that any of the recruits are putting out, anything like that. And then all of a sudden he ends up flipping his commitment. I think the most impressive thing though, Zach, is that, and this is what makes you wonder if this happens under a previous staff, is that Carolina is so focused on, the guys in state under previous staffs. And we've talked about it. That's a way that we feel like we want Carolina to run. We want them to run the state of North Carolina. That's important to us. And I still think that's certainly something you want them to do. But I don't know if previous staffs, Mac Brown, Larry Fedora, if they're going into the state of Ohio and finding a way to pull out a guy that is committed to the university in the state and a school that is just coming off a national championship. And if you're saying, well, maybe this is a kid that's trending in the wrong direction, maybe he's a guy that's about to fall out of being a 4-star prospect. I mean, this is a guy that's ranked well inside of the top 300 and is ranked inside of the top 200 if you go off the 24/7 composite rankings. 24/7 sports rankings don't have him nearly as high, but this is still a guy that ranks 178th overall in the composite rankings. He's ranked as the number 14 safety in the class. So a guy that is well on his way to staying a 4-star prospect, and Carolina goes out and gets him. I mean, this, past season as a junior finished with all state, all county, all district, and all conference honors, while helping lead his team to a perfect 16-0 record and the OHSAA Region 6 title. Unfortunately, his stats are not available because his school, somehow a team that is ranked inside of Max Prep's top 30, or was at the end of last season, ranked 30th in the nation, did not put up any stats on him. But this is a guy that is a huge addition for Carolina across the board, Zach. And for them to go into the state of Ohio and get it done, I think really just speaks volumes to where this staff is at and how well they are recruiting once again before they have even taken to the field to play a single game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very strong pickup just on the face of who this guy is as a prospect. Like you mentioned, ranked within the top 200, in that 177 to 178 range. And it really shows on his film sort of what you're looking at here. He is, a very, very good athlete and sort of thrives off that athleticism. In terms of his measurables, he is listed at 24/7 Sports as 5'10", 175. On3 lists him at 5'11", and the Huddle Film lists him at 6 foot. So some of that could be just, what shoes you're wearing on a given day, but right, maybe a little bit shade under what you'd look for in desired height for a defensive back, but certainly makes up for it with speed, with good lateral movement, and with physicality. He's not a huge guy, being in that 170 to 175 range, but is very willing to, get in the mix, to be a tackler, to come downhill and tackle the ball carrier. Moves extremely well sideline to sideline once he gets closer to that line of scrimmage. There's not a ton of one-on-one sort of coverage that you're seeing here, which I think is probably pretty normal for a safety, specifically a high school safety. But when he does a pretty good job. Plays physical on the ball, is not really playing the ball a ton. I mean, you don't see a ton on there as it relates to interceptions or things along those lines where he's getting the hand on the ball. But I think that's just sort of, something that is pretty normal for a high school safety. And sort of thrives on that athleticism, like I say. So it's really hard to view this as anything other than a massive addition to the class overall. I mean, whatever combination they were able to seek to land him, whether it be NIL, just relationships with the staff, relationship with the guys on campus, being on campus, whatever, it's really hard to, sort of look at this anyway, but they went into Ohio, flipped a guy from Ohio State that are the defending national champions. That sentence in of itself really just portrays this as a huge recruiting victory for the staff, and really a validation.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it does. And, when you look at it, I mean, you mentioned, Jakob Weatherspoon, a guy that is just 5'10", 172 pounds, certainly is a guy that I think at his size, you would think, how effective can he really be as a safety? Because your safeties are typically going to be guys that are above 6 foot, a little bit longer, and are typically going to have a little bit more weight on them. 5'10", 172 is slight, and that's something that I think he's probably going to have to work on just a little bit when he gets to the next level. But I wrote this down when I was looking at his film. I think he's as complete of a safety as you're going to find in this class. First thing that really jumps off the page to me is how consistently he shows off his motor. Again, we've talked about these guys constantly over the last, 6 months since Bill Belichick and his staff took over. This is a group. It's more like 7 months, actually, now that you look at it. But it feels like it's, such a short period of time that we've been talking about it, but they have been stacking these guys, that just have the motor, that it's constantly there, that you're never questioning whether or not they're going to be running plays down. I mean, he's a guy that's running plays down that are on the opposite side of the field from him. And, he constantly is able to do that. His speed, very impressive. And when he combines it with his ability to break on the football, it makes life tough for opposing quarterbacks because he's able to get his hands on so many passes. He's able to affect so many passing lanes. That's the thing that makes it really tough for teams when they're going up against him. Even at his small size, he competes for everything. And he's a guy that's going to find a way to make plays on the football. I wrote down the same thing that you did. Even though he's a guy that doesn't pile up interceptions, he does a really good job of breaking up important passes, especially down the field. I thought that was really the area that he shined. That's one thing that you're looking for from safeties, especially if they're going to play the deep safety spot, which is something that Carolina really needs. There are some guys in this class that could potentially play that spot. I think Jamarian Gordon is definitely one of those guys that you look at and think maybe can play that spot. But this, to me, there's no question. Weatherspoon can play that spot if he wants to. That's certainly something that he's able to do. Now, don't get it wrong. I think as a run defender, he's really, really good as well, especially for someone of his size. You know, he has some nice physicality to his game. When he combines it with his speed, he does a really good job of leveling big hits on guys at times, but also very strong tackler, a guy that does a really good job of wrapping up in space and helping to prevent some of those big plays that, some safeties, especially guys, that are looking to just come down and make you pay a price, they're going to allow some of those tackles where they're going to have some of those missed tackles that allow big plays. We've seen Carolina have those issues over the last few years where they've had safeties that, can be in the area to make plays, but they're just not strong enough tacklers to be able to do so. I don't think that's Weatherspoon's makeup. I think he's certainly a guy that can do all of that and maybe a little bit more. But to me, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking this is probably the player I am most excited about in this class so far, because I think he's just that complete. There's so many areas that he can show off in. And I think this is exactly what Carolina needs on the back end of their defense to go along with what they've already landed in this class so far here in 2026. I mean, he's the fourth safety commit in this class, but I think he's definitely the guy that we're going to be talking about the most, especially early on in his career. And who knows, with some of the guys that are on the roster ahead of him, a lot of unknowns. There are some guys that will be graduating after the season is over. Zach, this is a guy that could be finding himself some early playing time in Chapel Hill, something that maybe he wasn't going to be able to find at Ohio State, and is part of the reason why he ends up flipping his commitment.
Yeah, I think that can absolutely be considered something that's a big part of it, mainly because of his ability to likely play multiple positions on the defense. I think with his physical makeup, with his size, speed, everything along those lines, he can potentially play any defensive back spot outside of the outside corners. I probably wouldn't put him there, but either the primary safety spots, a nickel defender or dime defender, I think you'd feel comfortable playing him there. So it's really just a matter of, what they need to do to learn the playbook and get that down. But he's absolutely a guy that I could see playing early because he has that athletic profile that you trust him on the field. Even if he makes mistakes, he will have the athleticism to make up for that going through those sort of early growing pains. So I think that ability to say, hey, you're just one of our 6 best guys out there. We're willing to put you out there, in a dime package, a nickel package, what have you, or, have you as one of those primary safeties. I think that's, not unreasonable. So with this commitment, he now sort of shoots up at least my personal board of, one of these freshmen that we could see play early. I think he's, if not the top, he's pretty high up there as one of those options at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it's really just, the skill set combined with the opportunities that are going to be there at Carolina, especially if some of the guys that are unknown this year don't necessarily step up. But yeah, that versatility, as you talked about, that one of the other things that I liked about him and wrote down is that, they don't play him a lot in one-on-one coverage. You didn't see that often on film, but there were a few different times where you did see it. And I thought he did a really good job getting in and out of his breaks very smoothly and efficiently. That's what allows him to be able to break on the football as well as he does at the same time when he is playing at safety. But I think, that's something that you're looking for from guys that are going to be playing in one-on-one coverage is, do they hold their own? How fluid are their hips? Do they open up quickly? And can they stay with guys on the outside? He's got the speed to be able to do it. He's got the correct, hip motion and everything like that to be able to do all of what you need him to do if you're going to put him in that nickel corner spot. But I think he's good enough to play that deep safety spot. It's just a matter of, do you think that the height stands in the way for him? And at 5'10", look, there's a possibility that it could stand in the way for him. I don't think it does. I think it's something that Carolina is probably going to look at and say, even though he is a little bit of a shorter player, the way that he plays the football, I mean, really, when you look at it, 5'10", I mean, as opposed to some of the other guys that are playing at 6 foot, 6'1", there are times where it won't necessarily show up because he's a guy that's just that athletic. And I think that's what you're hoping is going to happen with him. I think that certainly is on the table for him. I mean, you look at Carolina's defensive backs for this season, just looking at the guys to see if there's somebody that he would compare to currently on the roster. I mean, Trey Miller, who's a guy that plays at the nickelback spot, is 5'10", but another guy that Carolina, plays at the nickel corner spot, but can play safety, did play it in high school and played it pretty successfully, was Ty White, who came from Buford High School, one of the best high schools in the state of North Carolina, and was very successful. Jalen Thompson, a guy that Carolina can use at corner or at safety, 5'11", still in that same range. And that's the other thing that you got to remember here too, is that even though he's 5'11", or even though he's 5'10", there's still a chance for him to be able to grow. So I'm going to be interested to see if he's a guy that could potentially grow as he gets into the college ranks. Who knows if he adds, another inch or two, that could be a huge difference for him. But to me, it doesn't stand in the way, Zach, of just how good his game is and what kind of leader he's going to be, I think, for this team in terms of the example that he's going to put out there on the field. You couldn't have asked for really a much better addition for Carolina in this class. And again, now we're talking about yet another blue chip prospect. And this one, a guy that's right at the top of the class, another headliner for Carolina, now the highest ranked player on the defensive side of the ball in this class for the Tar Heels. And it just seems like every time that we jump in here to talk about that, we seem to have a new guy that takes over that mantle as the best defensive player that Carolina's gotten. Travis Burgess takes a huge jump on the offensive side of the ball in the recent 24/7 sports rankings. So I think now there's a legitimate debate as to whether or not he is the better offensive prospect than Keon Chapman. But we'll stick on the defensive side of the ball. When you look at it, do you think that Jakob Weatherspoon is the best player on the defensive side of the ball that the Tar Heels have committed currently in the class?
I think there's certainly potential that. I think for me, it is a tough decision between Weatherspoon and then Treshaun Ruffin, simply because Ruffin plays on the defensive line, and I think that is a position both of need and then of emphasis, not only with what they added, at the end of last cycle in the transfer portal, and then in this class. I mean, interior defensive line has really been a point of, we know how important this is for football overall. We know how important this is for the Belichick defense specifically, to have that sort of, big body in the middle that can potentially, run stop there, can two gap if need be, if that's what they want to do. So from a pure positional standpoint, I think it's tough. I probably would say Weatherspoon, just because I still think he's likely, at the very least, from a defensive standpoint, in terms of defensive recruits that they have in this class, I think he's far and away the guy that is most ready to step on the field as a freshman. So I probably would say he does fit that spot at this point, but it is really tough there between Weatherspoon and Treshaun Ruffin on the defensive line to pick, who is sort of the guy that we'd have highest rated in this class, and then who's the guy that's most ready to step into, if not a starting role, a major role once they step on campus. That's Weatherspoon, so I'd probably have to give him the nod.
Yeah, I'd go with him as well. I would say he narrowly beats out both Calvin Thomas and Treshaun Ruffin. I just think there's more production there from him. And I think his game, when I watch it, looks like it's going to translate over to the college level a little bit quicker than just about anybody else's. Like I said, there's not an area of his game that I look at and really feel like it's a weakness. And for some of the other guys, I do think, we talked about Calvin Thomas being a guy that we need to see more from when it comes to dropping into coverage. When it comes to Treshaun Ruffin, it's really just that we need to see more production. We need to see more of that dominance in the middle, he is a guy that can take up two gaps for Carolina and really shut down just about everything. We've seen the traits that are there for both of those guys. We've talked about how both guys are traits players. But when it comes to Weatherspoon, I mean, I think this is almost a guy that I'm not going to say the traits aren't there. All the athletic traits are there, everything like that. But I don't think he necessarily looks the part of a guy that you would think is going to be super effective. And then when you turn on that film, you watch this guy turn into one of the better defenders in this class, one of the best defensive backs in the entire country in this 2026 class. So I love everything about him. I think he's a guy that, is going to play early for Carolina. I think there is a chance that some of those other guys will on the defensive side of the ball, but I think Weatherspoon is the guy that you'll see out there probably early enough next year. And I just feel like when you combine all of that, with the production that he had at the high school level, that's why I'll go with him and give him a slight edge. Now, last thing that we're going to talk about with him, because I know that there are some people that were saying this last night on social media, mainly Ohio State fans that were seeming to try to make up, some sort of reason for why he did not or why he chose to flip to Carolina. And look, part of it is that, they probably are recruiting over him. I wouldn't doubt that. But a lot of people that I saw that were, Ohio State fans, they said that it was because he was running away from competition. When you look at a guy that ends up flipping his commitment from Ohio State to Carolina, when we've seen this before, do you look at a guy that is flipping his commitment because they are recruiting over him as a guy that is afraid of competition? Or is there sometimes just better opportunities for you at other schools because, they are recruiting over you and you feel like you might not get to play behind some of those more talented guys?
Yeah, I think from the North Carolina perspective, it's really not something that you can concern yourself with in terms of, what Ohio State's depth chart looks like or anything along those lines. Ultimately, for North Carolina, their program, their fans, anything along those lines, that really can't be your concern. Your concern is your program, your depth chart, and your players. Is there any legitimacy to that? You can say that, but on the flip side of that, there is, an advantageous path to playing time being there. And that's, that's not necessarily running away from competition in all scenarios. In some, it's just, I have a path to play earlier here. I want to play, and I feel like I have the ability to play early and still, get the development that I want to have to get to the NFL. And there's really, from our perspective at this point, we've been pretty clear on that. There's not a huge question in, I think, our minds, a lot of fans' minds at this point, that Coach Belichick and the staff know what it takes to develop guys to get to the NFL. So in some sense, you could say that a guy's running from competition. And in another sense, you can say that he's betting on himself and his abilities by choosing the place that he feels is best for him. And, gives him the opportunity not only to play early, but to be coached by, a Hall of Fame coach and, a very experienced staff. So there's, two sides to everything. There's a flip side to everything. But from the perspective of North Carolina fans specifically, I would not have a concern over that. You got a top 200 player. I would celebrate that. And, I would leave it at that as far as North Carolina fan concerned with this.
Yeah, I don't think you can be concerned with it either. I find that it is really hard for you as a fan to judge a kid for leaving and say that he is afraid of competition. If he was afraid of competition, he wouldn't have committed to Ohio State in the first place, because he probably knew as a player that was ranked inside of the top 200, but outside of where a lot of Ohio State's recruits are going to be ranked, that he was probably going to be recruited over. I think that he looked at this as an opportunity to be coached by Bill Belichick, one of the greatest of all time, and a place where you could probably get a little bit more early playing time than Ohio State, and said, why not? Because if I go to Ohio State, there's a chance that I don't get to play. I'm going to have to hit the transfer portal anyways. And that means that I'm not going to be able to, or, I'm going to be limited to certain areas that I can go to. With this, I think, the other thing that's interesting to me about it is you look at, when he is on campus and ultimately what that means compared to some of the other guys that are committed in Ohio State's class. I mean, there are two other safeties that are committed in the class. And at the time when he made his decision to visit Carolina, both of those guys were already committed. So he knew what he was up against. He still took his official visit to Ohio State. So I really think this was just him comparing the places. I think this is a good job by Armand Hawkins of going out and getting a guy that really was looking for, a place that would value him maybe a little bit more than Ohio State. I don't think it shows that there is a lack of competition, but I think, as you said, you can't concern yourself with that. And here's the thing: if there is a concern about a lack of competition, a lack of competitive fire for him, you'll learn it pretty quick. You'll learn it when he gets on campus, when he is forced to compete with guys that are currently on the depth chart, guys that will join him on the depth chart that, we've seen are not going to be afraid of competition in this class. And then eventually down the line, there would be other guys that would be able to show you that, hey, this guy isn't necessarily the most competitive. To me, you're looking at this as, hey, even if that is a little bit of a concern in the back of your mind, the talent's too good to pass up here. You're talking about a guy that is ranked as your highest rated recruit right now in the 2026 class on the defensive side of the football. So for you to pass up on that, you better be 100% sure that this is not the guy. I don't think they could say that. I think they looked at him and said, this is a guy that, maybe some of those concerns are a little out there. This is just someone that is getting an opportunity to potentially play early at Carolina, and that's the reason that he wants to come here. And I think it's worth taking the risk for the Tar Heels. We'll just have to wait and see how that pays off. So with his commitment, Carolina is now up to 33 commits in the 2023 class, or 2026 class. Got it mixed up with all the threes there. But, when you look at it now, Carolina, again, still in a position where I think they have a ton of numbers at this point in terms of quantity. The most commits in the entire country. They have surpassed USC in that ranking. Now they have two more than the Trojans do, who have 31 so far this year. But I do think that Carolina is going to leave open the possibility that they can still flip certain guys. We talked about some of those other positions that Carolina could be looking at. I don't think we thought that we would be talking about a flip as soon as we basically finished up with doing that Calvin Thomas edition of the podcast. But I do think there are still some guys that they can eventually go out and get in this class. There are still some areas that they're probably looking at to potentially flip somebody. But I do think that this was one of their big goals. I think now there'll probably be, maybe 3 or 4 other guys that they're keeping an eye on as we go into the season. And then you could potentially see them flip those guys later on down the line. But with this, now Carolina's up to 17th in the overall rankings. This combined with Travis Burgess, as we talked about, huge jump for him in the 24/7 sports rankings. He's now the number 65 overall prospect, so the highest ranked prospect for Carolina according to 24/7 sports if you just go off of their rankings. And then he is the number 243 overall prospect in the 24/7 sports composite rankings. So he takes a significant jump there as well. And now is inside of the top 300. Those two guys, part of the reason that Carolina is now up to 17th. But I think it shows you, Zach, even with this type of commitment, unless Carolina is able to get 3 or 4 more of these types of commitments, I just don't know if they're going to be able to sneak into the top 15 in this class. But I do think that top 20 is something that people maybe should wrap their minds around and feel pretty confident about when it comes to where this staff is at in this recruiting cycle, being that most of these guys are going to make their decisions before this group even gets to coach.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of where this class stands now, it does feel like spots are becoming a little bit more limited. So unless they, switch out, unless they have some guys decommit and they replace them with higher rated guys, it's hard to see them get to the top 15 specifically. For me, what I've always been looking for here with this first class and just for UNC classes overall is ideally top 25. So if you're at 17, I think you're doing a good job in terms of that. And in addition, with where North Carolina is right now in the pecking order, you'd feel like they want to have a good recruiting class in that top 25 and then supplement it with good portal recruiting. Well, I think they're doing the job here with this 2026 class right now, and getting those guys in there, and really having a good mix of different types of guys. I mean, you have these 4-star guys that you feel like can compete early on, but you also have some developmental prospects, which are going to be important for, a program like North Carolina. So I really feel like they've been doing a good job. I feel like 17 is a good spot for them, especially as we've mentioned, they have not shown, what this team or what this program is going to look like on the field on Saturdays. We don't really know what the schemes are going to look like on offense or defense. We have some guesses, mainly based on, Bill Belichick's tenure in New England. But other than that, there's a lot that, we have to wait and see as fans, and that these recruits are sort of taking leaps of faith to see what this program ends up looking like in a real football scenario. So I feel like they're in a great spot. There's certainly potential there as we wait for a few other guys to make decisions to potentially get up into that top 15. I'm not necessarily holding my breath over it, but I'm also not at all upset if they stick at their current 17 spot, maybe slip back to 18. Either way, I think this is a great start to recruiting under Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I think it's basically as good of a start as you could have asked for. And when I said, didn't coach, I mean, yeah, of course, I mean, coach a game. They've been coaching on the field and everything like that, but we have no idea what that looks like because nobody has been at these practices. They haven't been allowed to. None of the media has been allowed to. So you have honestly no idea what Bill Belichick at Carolina looks like just yet. You have to wait until you actually take the field on September 1st, unless they're going to let us have all sorts of access during the fall, starting in August for fall camp. I don't think they're going to. I think they're going to do it very similar to how they did the spring, if not even more closed off. I don't even know if we're going to get any sort of media availability from Bill Belichick. We may have already seen the last media availability from Bill Belichick. He might address the media one last time, even before the fall camp, the start of fall camp, but then that might be it, because there are no rules on how many times you have to meet with the media, not like the NFL. So with it being a little bit different like that, I think he's going to probably take full advantage of it. And for them to get 33 guys to commit to them, to be the 17th overall class and have 8 4-stars that are committed as of right now. For us, we have 9 blue chip prospects, guys that are ranked inside of the top 500, which basically at this point is almost becoming the majority of composite 4-stars. Very close. I think there's like 440 something 4-stars at this point. So it's getting to that point where they're thinking the same thing that we are here on this podcast. But I mean, that's an amazing job done by Carolina. And as you mentioned, and people will say, well, what about Xavier Griffin-Haynes' tweet yesterday where he said this class is going to finish inside the top 10? The only way that's going to happen is if Carolina ends up landing guys or flipping guys from these schools and really starts kicking guys out of the class. And I don't know if that's what Bill Belichick's going to do. This is very different for Bill Belichick and his staff than in the NFL, because in the NFL, even if you were interested in a guy in free agency that at the start of free agency wasn't necessarily as interested in you, you can't just kick a guy off of a team because they have a contract. Here in college, it is a little bit different. Before National Signing Day, before these guys sign their letters of intent, they're just committed. So even if they are committed to you, you can pull that offer and say, look, we're not going to end up taking you on. We're going to take somebody else in this class that's a little bit better or whatever. I don't know if he's going to do that. We know the previous coach here at Carolina, Mack Brown, was not that type of guy. Mack Brown was a guy that if he ended up taking your commitment, for the most part, he was going to stick to it unless there was some sort of academic reason or something like that, why Carolina couldn't end up taking you on. I think you're going to see a similar approach from Bill Belichick. I'd be shocked if he ends up kicking guys out of this class, especially because they feel like his types of guys. We've talked about, how many guys are traits guys, how many of these guys have high motors, those are things that you just can't teach, and it's something that this staff is looking for across the board. So I'd be really shocked if they do end up kicking anybody out of this class and being able to make a run at a top 15 or top 10 class. Now, really quick before we get out of here, let's focus here just for a moment on Travis Burgess, how impressive his climb has been, Zach. I mean, to go from a guy that was outside of the top 500 in most of the rankings that I saw, I can't remember where he initially was for 24/7 Sports, but I know he was definitely not anywhere near as high as he is now. This is a significant jump for him, and unfortunately, Rivals is kind of holding him back, but this is a guy that, for 24/7 Sports, they've been doing their homework on him, and he's gone from a guy that was ranked initially outside of the top 500. The lowest he ever got in the rankings, I'm looking at it right now, was 554 over 554, overall. And he's now made a jump all the way up to 65th from 265th in the last rankings. I mean, this is an unprecedented story, and one that just gets better and better for the Tar Heels quarterback commit here in the 2026 class.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking about this guy as being a potential riser since he committed, since he picked North Carolina over Auburn. And, he was really able to validate what we saw on film, and even more so to some extent at the Elite 11 this past summer. Elite 11 is the premier sort of quarterback competition in the summer that, guys go out and compete every year. It has a ton of eyeballs on it from a recruiting perspective. And, he held his own with really a lot of these sort of nationally recruited quarterbacks. Didn't look radically different from them in terms of, how he processed the field, how he threw the ball, how he was able to compete. So I think you see that reflected in this ratings bump here. We've sort of maintained, or I've maintained, that I think this is a guy that we could see, get up to that top 100 or top 150 range. He's certainly on the way with this, update by 24/7 Sports specifically. So when it's all said and done after his senior year, I don't think that's out of the, realm of possibility for him. We'll just have to see how he performs in his senior season and what he adds on to this performance here in the summer. But, playing in the state of Georgia, he's certainly going to have that opportunity. He's certainly going to have a ton of eyeballs on him. So I think overall we can just look and say, hey, this is another high-quality quarterback recruit, commit, and then future enrollee that they've added to this room. And, it's going to be a really, really fun quarterback competition, or just quarterback room overall, depending on how things shape out in the 2025 season. But going into 2026, this is going to be a very good quarterback room, and likely one of the best in the country.
Yeah, I mean, with Burgess, I mean, you look at where he is ranked, just in terms of the overall industry rankings from Rivals, they have him at 191 and 14th, although I think for their site themselves, they have him ranked much lower, because ESPN and 24/7 Sports both have him ranked pretty highly. And a lot of that is because of the showing at the Elite 11 camp. But also, I mean, this is a guy that, with 1 year of production was really, really good, and you're expecting is going to get better this year at Grayson High School, one of the best schools in the entire country. So, I mean, this climb to me is unprecedented. To go from where you were at one point ranked outside of the top 550 to now being ranked 65th in the rankings, just according to 24/7 Sports. I mean, this deserves so much credit. And congratulations to Travis. He's earned it. But what it does is it shows you that, yeah, this is a guy that's going to come in here and he's going to be ready to compete in this quarterback room. Does that mean that he ultimately is going to be a guy that's going to end up somehow winning one of these or winning the starting quarterback battle or something like that next season? I don't know about that. I mean, we've got to figure out, of course, how long Gio Lopez is going to be here, how Travis Burgess compares with Bryce Baker. Although when we talked or when I talked with Andrew Ivins on one of the editions of the podcast, he said this is a guy that, is very comparable to Bryce Baker in terms of talent. And I think at the time, we were kind of sitting there saying, well, this is still a guy that's ranked in the mid 200s as opposed to a guy that was ranked inside of the top 100. Well, now you're starting to see why exactly Andrew Ivins was saying stuff like that based off of what he saw at the Elite 11 camp. And I mean, when you look at it, across the board, he was a guy that finished inside of the top 10, really finished inside of the top 8 or 9 on a lot of those boards. And he is, 7th out of the quarterbacks in this class, according to 24/7 Sports. And Andrew Ivins was higher on him than just about anybody. That's a big part of the reason why he made this jump that he made. And I think he's in position to be able to compete to maybe be the starter for Carolina a couple of years down the line. We just have to wait and see how long Gio Lopez is going to be here. But Bryce Baker, a guy who at one time we thought was going to be the starting quarterback here for Carolina, we don't think that he's going to be the starter this year. And who knows moving forward, because of just how good Travis Burgess has shown that he is, if he is going to be the guy, this could be the future of Tar Heel football if they hold on to him, because there are going to be some schools you would imagine now that are going to be trying to make a charge for him. So this is on this coaching staff to make sure that they find a way to hold on to him. So that's going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. Guys, head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Read all about Jakob Weatherspoon and his his breakdown, our film breakdown on him, as well as would say our stat breakdown, but unfortunately there's nothing in there. But do go and read that article. I go a little more in depth with this film breakdown than I did here on tonight's edition of the podcast, so you don't want to miss that. Also, plenty of other stuff over there recruiting-wise on the site. Still waiting on an announcement from Jamarius Conyers, a guy that was considering Carolina. I would imagine that Weatherspoon, even though he is a guy that is in the defensive backfield, because he doesn't play corner, shouldn't have much of an effect on his decision. But that was supposed to be a decision that was made on Tuesday. We are still sitting here on Thursday, and there is no decision. So we're going to be monitoring that. Any of the other guys, CJ Sadler, any news that comes out about him, any of the defensive tackles. I know a lot of people are still kind of wondering what's going on with Viliami Moala. Haven't really heard anything on his front. Same thing with T.I. Umokayas. Haven't heard anything on his front. But if we do, we will, of course, keep you up to date with all of that stuff on the website. And then we are getting ready to push out our position previews, guys. We're going to go room by room and give you all that you need to know for this season. We'll talk about every player in each and every room, what type of effect they could have this season for Carolina, who are our guys that we project as the starters at these positions. All of that stuff you will be able to find on our website here. That'll be coming up starting early next week. I will release those onto the website, so make sure that you guys are keeping an eye out for that. In terms of the podcast where we'll do the position previews, not sure when exactly we're going to start. I said the hope was to start tomorrow. We'll see whether or not that's going to happen. If it is going to be tomorrow that we're going to start it, then I will definitely tweet that out for you guys, just like I did prior to tonight's edition, so that you guys know that we're having an edition coming up. But it could be early on next week when we get into those. And then from there, we'll be flowing. We'll be doing the position previews. Those will lead straight into the breakout players for this upcoming season, some of our bold predictions for this upcoming season. And then we will have you guys covered for the opener when Carolina takes on TCU. That is September 1st. We are about a month and a half away, a little under a month and a half away until Carolina gets it going. So a lot of great stuff coming for you on the podcast and on the website side of things. You don't want to miss any of it. Best places to check it out on social media at Heel Tough Blog. That is the spot where you can get all the articles, all the video editions of the podcast, all the audio editions of the podcast in one spot, and there's nothing else that's on that timeline. So what I suggest you do is you go there, you follow, and then right next to the follow button, you turn on those notifications anytime that any of those different elements that we put out there, we have something new for you guys. You'll get a notification letting you know that we have something new for you. Also, The Facebook page, great place to check out the video editions of the podcast and the articles. All you got to do is search at Heel Tough Blog on Facebook. Just search Heel Tough Blog itself if you want to. That'll take you there as well. And then over on YouTube, if you're a YouTube watcher to the podcast, it'd be great if you guys could subscribe to our channel for us. That means you won't miss any editions of the show. Every football edition is live. Most basketball editions, especially once we get into the season, they will be live as well. So all of those will pop up for you guys to be able to watch. And same thing with the What If series that we got going on right now in the off season for basketball. So you don't want to miss that. Make sure you hit that subscribe button today. If you're over on the WFNZ YouTube page, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. We would greatly appreciate that. If you are watching us through that version, that would help us out. That helps our station out, which means it helps our jobs out. And, me and Josh would greatly appreciate that. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. I want to thank Zack for hosting with me. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.